My name is Juliet Whitfield, and I was 35 years old when my father decided to turn New Year's Eve into a courtroom and make me the case everyone was allowed to judge. We were sitting around my parents' dining table, plates still warm, glasses half full, the kind of family dinner where people smiled for photos before saying things they would never want recorded. My brother's kids were laughing in the next room. My mother was smoothing a napkin in her lap, like she already knew something sharp was coming and had chosen not to stop it. Then my father lifted his glass, looked straight at me, and said with a little laugh, "Still single at 35? Guess New Year's is just you and your regrets." A few people chuckled because that was easier than admitting it was cruel. I kept my hand around my glass and said nothing. My mother looked at me with that cold, polished expression she saved for moments when she wanted to sound gentle while cutting deep. "Some people are alone for a reason," she said. That was the moment the room shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough for me to feel 8 years of silence rise in my chest all at once. My father leaned back, satisfied, like he had finally said what everyone else was thinking. So I set my glass down carefully, looked at him across the table, and smiled. "I'm not alone," I said. "I've been married for years. You were simply never invited." My mother's face went pale. My brother stopped chewing. My father's smile disappeared so fast it almost looked painful. Then his palm hit the table hard enough to shake the silverware. "Explain yourself. Now." And for the first time in my life, I was ready to. "Before I tell you what happened after that, tell me where you are, and what the weather is like where you are. I just want to know how far my story can travel." To understand why those words landed like a match on gasoline, you have to understand the kind of family I came from. My father, Grant Whitfield, had spent most of his adult life managing a small bank branch in Greenville, South Carolina. And even after retirement, he still carried himself like every room had a ledger only he knew how to balance. He liked clean numbers, clean lawns, clean reputations, and families that looked good from the outside. My mother, Diane Whitfield, had worked for years in the front office of an elementary school, which meant she had mastered the art of smiling sweetly while judging everything from someone's shoes to the way they raised their children. They were not monsters. That would be too simple. They paid bills on time. They sent birthday cards. They showed up at church, brought casseroles to sick neighbors, and knew exactly what to say when someone else's family was struggling. But inside our house, love always came with a shape you were expected to fit. My older brother, Caleb Whitfield, fit that shape perfectly. He married young, bought a house 15 minutes from my parents, had 2 children with his wife Marissa, coached Little League, grilled on Sundays, and posted the kind of family pictures my parents could show people without explaining anything. To my father, Caleb was proof that he had raised at least one child correctly. To my mother, Caleb's life was safe, familiar, and easy to defend. Then there was me, Juliet Whitfield, the daughter who left Greenville after college and never came back except for holidays, funerals, birthdays, and guilt. I was never reckless. I never got arrested, never asked them for money, never embarrassed them in any way that should have mattered, but I had committed a quieter crime in my father's eyes. I had built a life he could not easily summarize to his friends. I did not live nearby. I did not have children. I did not bring a husband to Thanksgiving. I did not spend my weekends sitting in the same pew, waving at the same families, repeating the same stories until they became proof of belonging. My father believed in family, but what he really meant was visibility. He wanted family close enough to photograph, simple enough to explain, and obedient enough to make him feel respected. Anything outside that frame made him uncomfortable, and when my father felt uncomfortable, he turned it into a lesson for someone else. He called it concern, He called it honesty. He called it wanting the best for me. But concern does not humiliate you in front of relatives. Honesty does not wait until everyone is watching. Wanting the best for someone does not sound like a joke designed to make the whole table laugh at their life. For years, I let him have his little comments because it was easier than starting a war over dinner. You work too much, Juliet. That apartment in Atlanta must feel empty. Your brother understood what mattered. My mother would soften the blow without removing the knife. Your father just worries about you. Caleb would look down at his plate and pretend he had not heard. Marissa would change the subject to the kids, and I would smile because that was what I had trained myself to do. I smiled through the questions about dating. I smiled through the church ladies my mother tried to recommend. I smiled when my father told me that success did not mean much if I had no one waiting for me at home. What none of them knew was that someone had been waiting for me at home for 8 years. Someone who knew the sound of my keys in the door. Someone who could tell from my voice whether a day had broken me or just bent me a little. Someone my father had never earned the right to meet. My work was one of the first things my family learned to misunderstand on purpose. I was the director of crisis operations for a private disaster relief organization based in Atlanta. That title sounds clean when you say it quickly, but the job itself was anything but clean. It meant phone calls at 2 a.m. because a hurricane had shifted course. It meant standing in a temporary command center with 3 phones, a dying laptop battery, and a list of families who needed shelter before nightfall. It meant deciding which trucks moved first, which medical team got sent where, which county had fuel, which shelter had power, and how to stretch resources when there were never enough of them. I coordinated emergency housing, supplies, field teams, volunteer units, transportation routes, and sometimes the awful conversations no one else wanted to have. My job existed in the space between disaster and dignity. When people lost everything, my team tried to make sure they did not lose themselves too. I loved the work. Not because it was glamorous, it was not. There were no perfect photos, no neat endings, no applause that lasted longer than the next emergency. Most days, success looked like a mother getting a motel voucher before her children had to sleep in a car. It looked like an elderly man receiving his medication after 3 days without power. It looked like a flooded town getting portable showers, generators, and clean water before the news trucks moved on. That kind of work mattered to me. It had always mattered to me. But to my family, it was just another sign that I had chosen the wrong life. My father used to say, "Running around after disasters is not a future, Juliet. When are you going to build something that lasts?" He said it like I was playing pretend in a costume, like I would eventually outgrow purpose and settle into the life he had imagined for me. My mother would ask whether all that stress was the reason I had not found anyone. Caleb once told me gently that maybe I was using work as an excuse not to face how lonely I was. I remember staring at my phone after that call, sitting in an airport outside Tampa, still wearing mud on my boots from a flooded neighborhood where my team had spent the day relocating families. I almost told him then. I almost said, "I am not lonely. I am married." But I did not, because that was the thing about my family. They did not ask questions to learn. They asked questions to confirm what they already believed. I had tried sharing the truth of my life in smaller ways. When our organization helped relocate hundreds of families after a coastal storm, I sent a news article to the family group chat. My father replied, "Good job," and then immediately asked Caleb whether the kids had won their soccer games. When I was invited to speak at a national emergency management conference in Denver, I sent a picture from the stage. My mother responded with a heart emoji and then wrote 3 paragraphs about my nephew's school play. When I received an award for community recovery leadership, I posted a photo of the plaque. Caleb wrote, "That's awesome." And 2 minutes later, Marissa sent pictures of their new kitchen backsplash. I do not blame children for being celebrated. I loved my niece and nephew. They were innocent in all of it. What hurt was realizing that in my family, my life was always background music. Caleb's life was the main event. His mortgage, his kids, his promotions, his vacations, his family Christmas card. Everything he did became evidence of stability. Everything I did became a strange little detail they did not know how to value. After a while, I stopped offering them pieces of myself. It was not sudden. It happened quietly. One missed update, one deleted text, one achievement I kept to myself, one photograph I chose not to send. I told myself it was peace. I told myself I was being mature. But really, I was learning how to disappear from my own family without them noticing. By the time I met the man who became my husband, I had already learned one dangerous lesson. If something was precious to me, the safest place for it was far away from my father's voice. I met Ethan Bellamy in New Orleans during a hurricane recovery conference that I had almost skipped. I was exhausted that week, running on black coffee and hotel sleep, and I remember sitting in the back of a conference room thinking that if one more person used the phrase long-term resilience without explaining how to pay for it, I was going to walk out. Then Ethan stood up during a panel and politely disagreed with nearly everyone on stage. He was an architect who specialized in community recovery housing after floods, hurricanes, and wildfires. He did not talk like a man trying to impress a room. He talked like someone who had stood in enough destroyed neighborhoods to know that good intentions could still build bad solutions. I challenged him during the question period because I thought his timeline was unrealistic. He argued that emergency housing built too quickly could trap families in unsafe conditions for years. I argued that families without roofs did not have the luxury of waiting for perfect design. He looked at me, nodded, and said, "Then the answer has to be fast and worthy, not fast instead of worthy." I hated how much I liked that sentence. After the panel, I expected him to avoid me. Instead, he found me near the coffee station and said, "I think we were both right, which is annoying because it means the work is harder." That was the first thing Ethan ever said to me when we were not standing in front of a microphone. I laughed before I could stop myself. We talked for nearly 4 hours. First about housing models, federal funding delays, zoning problems, and why disaster recovery always punished the poorest families twice. Then about Atlanta, New Orleans, childhood, music, bad airport food, and the strange loneliness of work that mattered too much to leave behind. Ethan had calm eyes, the kind that did not rush people. He listened without waiting for his turn to speak. I was not used to that. In my family, silence usually meant judgment. With Ethan, silence felt like room. 7 months later, we got married in a small chapel in Savannah after a summer rainstorm. There were 11 people there, all friends, no relatives from my side except one older cousin I trusted more than most people in my bloodline. I wore a simple ivory dress. Ethan cried before I reached the front, which I teased him about for years. After the ceremony, we ate seafood at a little restaurant near the river, and the owner sent us a slice of cake because she said anyone willing to get married in that weather deserved sugar. It was not the kind of wedding my mother would have planned. There were no church announcements, no seating chart drama, no family speeches, no father-daughter dance where my father could perform Pride for an audience. It was quiet, sincere, and ours. That was exactly why I loved it. People ask why I did not tell my family. The answer is not that I was ashamed. I was never ashamed of Ethan. I was proud of him from the beginning. I did not tell them because I could already hear what my father would do with the news. He would ask why Ethan was not from Greenville. He would ask why his work took him into disaster zones instead of a stable office. He would ask whether his family was respectable. He would ask why we rushed. even though 7 months of knowing Ethan felt more honest than 35 years of being misunderstood at my parents' table. He would turn my marriage into a trial and himself into the judge. Ethan knew all of this. I told him more than I wanted to admit. One night, a few weeks before the wedding, I asked if he thought I was being unfair by not inviting them. He was quiet for a moment, then took my hand and said, "I do not need to be accepted by people who have not learned how to respect you yet." That sentence settled something in me, not because it solved everything, but because it named the truth. My family did not simply lack information about me. They lacked respect for the information they already had. So I kept my marriage private, not hidden from shame, but protected from contempt. For 8 years, Ethan was my home, my witness, and the part of my life my father could not reach. Our marriage was not perfect in the polished, staged way people pretend online. It was better than that. It was real. Ethan and I built a life in Atlanta that did not need to perform itself for anyone. We had a small house with too many books, a back porch full of plants, and an old rescue dog named Murphy, who believed every thunderstorm was a personal attack. Our schedules were ridiculous. Sometimes Ethan would be in coastal Georgia reviewing flood-resistant housing designs while I was coordinating shelter operations 3 states away. Sometimes we ate dinner at 10:30 at night, standing in the kitchen because neither of us had the energy to sit down. Sometimes our anniversary gifts were practical things like noise-canceling headphones, better luggage, or one unforgettable year, a generator after a storm knocked out power for half our neighborhood. But there was love in all of it. Ethan knew how I took my coffee when I was angry, which was stronger than usual, and in the chipped blue mug. I knew that he pretended not to care about awards, but saved every handwritten thank you note from communities he had helped rebuild. He came to my speeches when he could, always sitting where I could see him. I reviewed his project proposals late at night, circling sentences and writing comments in the margins. We were not lonely. We were busy, tired, stubborn, grateful, and deeply together. That is what made the secrecy complicated. It protected us, yes, but protection can become a wall even when you built it for good reasons. I went home to Greenville alone for Thanksgiving, alone for birthdays, alone for my niece's dance recital, alone for my father's retirement dinner. Every time, my empty passenger seat became proof of whatever story my family wanted to tell about me. "You could have brought someone," my mother would say, as if I had a closet full of suitable men and had simply forgotten to pack one. My father would make jokes about saving money because he only had to set one place for me. Caleb would ask if I was seeing anyone, then quickly add, "No pressure," which somehow made it worse. I learned to lie in small, boring ways. Ethan was a work call. Our anniversary trip was a conference. The silver band I wore on a chain under my blouse was nothing sentimental. When my mother had her 62nd birthday dinner, I drove to Greenville without him and watched my father give a toast about family being the people who show up. I remember sitting there with my hands folded in my lap, thinking about Ethan back in Atlanta, eating reheated soup because I had chosen once again not to bring him into a room that would not know how to honor him. That was one of the first times the secret felt less like protection and more like punishment. Not punishment for my family, punishment for me. Ethan never demanded that I change it. That was the hardest part. If he had been angry, maybe I could have argued. If he had accused me of hiding him, maybe I could have defended myself. But he understood too much. He would kiss my forehead before I left for family events and say, "Come home when you're ready." The patience in that sentence broke my heart a little more every time. By the New Year's Eve dinner that changed everything, I was tired in a way sleep could not fix. My father had texted 3 days earlier, "Be on time. Family matters more than another work emergency." I stared at that message for a long time. That week, Ethan was in Texas helping review housing plans for a flooded rural county, and he offered to fly back early. I told him not to. I said it would just be dinner. Just a few hours. Just one more evening of smiling through comments I had heard before. He did not look convinced, but he trusted me. "Call me at midnight," he said, "no matter what happens." I promised I would. When I drove to Greenville, I told myself I was going because my mother had sounded tired on the phone. I told myself I was going because family was complicated and I did not want to be cruel. But somewhere deep down, I think I knew I was nearing the end of what I could swallow. I had spent 8 years protecting my peace. I had not realized how close I was to finally protecting myself. So when my father hit the table and said, "Explain yourself. Now," I did not flinch. That surprised me more than it surprised anyone else. For most of my life, that tone had been enough to shrink me. It was the voice he used when a bill was late, when Caleb scratched the car as a teenager, when I came home from college and said I might not move back to Greenville. It was the voice of a man who believed volume was the same thing as authority. But that night, the sound of his palm against the table did not make me afraid. It made something inside me go very still. I picked up my phone, opened my photos, and turned the screen toward them. The first picture was from our wedding day in Savannah. Ethan was standing in front of me in a dark suit, rain still shining on the chapel windows behind us, holding my hands like he had just been handed the future and did not want to drop it. I heard my mother inhale sharply. I swiped to the next photo. Ethan and I in Puerto Rico, sweaty and sunburned, standing beside a row of newly built storm-resistant homes. Another photo, the two of us at a recovery leadership gala in Nashville, his hand resting lightly on my back, while I laughed at something off camera. Another, our 5th anniversary in the Blue Ridge Mountains, wrapped in blankets on a cabin porch, Murphy asleep between us. Another, Ethan in the audience at my award ceremony in Atlanta, looking so proud it still made my throat tighten. No one spoke for several seconds. Caleb looked stunned. Marissa covered her mouth. My mother's eyes kept moving from my face to the phone like she was trying to make 8 years appear in reverse. My father was the first to break the silence. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his voice had lost some of its force. "You expect us to believe you have been married for 8 years and simply never mentioned it?" "Yes," I said, "because that is what happened." "Marriage is not something you hide like a secret bank account," he snapped. "Were you trying to embarrass this family?" I almost laughed then. Not because it was funny, but because even faced with proof of my life, his first instinct was to make my marriage about his reputation. "No," I said. "I was trying to protect something valuable from a room that had never treated anything valuable to me with care." My mother's face crumpled a little. "Juliet, why would you say that?" "Because it is true." My voice did not shake. I looked at her, then at Caleb, then back at my father. "Do you know what I actually do for work? Not the vague version, not Juliet travels too much, or Juliet helps after storms. Do you know what my job is?" My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother whispered, "You coordinate relief programs." "I direct crisis operations across multiple states," I said. "I manage emergency shelter networks, field teams, supply chains, and recovery logistics when communities are falling apart. Last year, my team helped place more than 900 displaced people into safe temporary housing after 2 major storms. I sent the article to the family group chat. Caleb looked down, he remembered. Dad replied with a thumbs up, I continued. Then asked Caleb about Little League. When I won the Recovery Leadership Award in Atlanta, I sent a picture. Mom sent a heart. And then we spent 40 minutes talking about Marissa's kitchen renovation. When I gave a speech in Denver about rural disaster response, I sent the link. No one watched it. My mother started to say my name, but I kept going. not loudly. That mattered. I was not yelling. I was testifying. I stopped sharing because every important thing in my life disappeared in this family. It became background. It became something to politely acknowledge before returning to the lives you understood. So when I met someone I loved, someone kind and brilliant and steady, someone who actually listened when I spoke, I made a choice. I kept him away from this table. My father's jaw tightened. So this is our fault? No, I said. My choices are mine, but the reason those choices felt necessary belongs in this room. That landed. I saw it hit Caleb first. His face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to know he had finally understood that his golden place in the family had been built partly out of my erasure. My father pushed his chair back. I will not be lectured in my own house. Then listen instead. The words came out before I could soften them, and for once, I did not take them back. You called me lonely for years because it made you feel right. You called me selfish because my life did not orbit yours. You called my work unstable because you did not know how to brag about it at church. And tonight, you tried to humiliate me in front of everyone because you thought I had no proof that I was loved. His face went red. My mother had tears in her eyes now, but I could not tell whether they were for me or for the discomfort of finally hearing the truth in public. I stood up and reached for my coat. You do not get to meet Ethan because you are curious. You do not get access to my marriage because your pride is wounded. If you ever meet my husband, it will be because you have learned how to respect your daughter first. My father said my name once, lower this time, maybe warning, maybe pleading. I no longer cared which. I looked at him and said, I did not come here to be judged. I came here to say goodbye to the version of me that kept asking for permission. Then I walked out before the main course was served. Behind me, no one laughed. No one called after me except my mother, and even she only said my name once, like she knew she had no right to ask me to stay. Outside, the cold air felt honest. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Ethan. Just 2 words. You okay? For the first time all night, I smiled. I typed back, I will be. Then I got in my car and drove away from the house where I had spent too many years making myself smaller. The aftermath did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like a slow crack through glass. At first, there was silence. No calls that night. No apology the next morning. Just a single text from Caleb that said, I had no idea. I stared at it for a long time before answering. I know. That was part of the problem. My mother called 2 days later, but I did not pick up. She left a voicemail that began with, Your father is upset. And I deleted it before the sentence could finish. I was done treating his discomfort like an emergency. By the end of the week, the story had started moving through the family because secrets do not stay still once they escape a dining room. An aunt called my mother asking if it was true that I had been married for years. A cousin found a video of one of my conference speeches online and sent it to the family chat with the message, Juliet is incredible. Why did nobody tell us about this? That was when my father began to understand the part that hurt him most. He had not only been wrong, he had been publicly wrong. The image he had spent years polishing, the wise father, the respected man, the one who knew what a successful family looked like, had cracked in front of the very people he wanted to impress. A week later, someone from his church mentioned that they had seen my organization's work featured in a regional news segment after a flood response. My father, who loved sounding informed, had to stand there and admit he had not seen it. For a man like Grant Whitfield, that was a punishment sharper than shouting. He had to face the fact that strangers knew more about his daughter's life than he did. My mother called again after that. This time, her message was different. She did not mention my father's feelings. She said, Juliet, I am sorry we made it easier for you to hide joy than share it. That was the first sentence that made me call her back. I did not forgive her in that phone call. I need to be clear about that. Real forgiveness is not a switch someone flips because the person who hurt them finally feels bad. I asked her what she was sorry for. She cried, but she answered. She said she was sorry for letting my father turn concern into criticism. She was sorry for acting like marriage, and children were the only proof of a meaningful life. She was sorry for teaching me that good news was safer when kept quiet. That was the first honest conversation I had ever had with my mother. Then she asked if she could meet Ethan. I told her I would ask him, and I told her there would be rules. No jokes about how long it took, no questions about children, no comments about why we chose a small wedding, no pretending the last 8 years had been a cute misunderstanding. If they came into our home, they came with respect, or they did not come at all. In March, Ethan and I hosted our 8th anniversary dinner in Atlanta. My parents came. Caleb came too, without Marissa and the kids, because he said he needed to be present without hiding behind the noise of family. Ethan opened the door himself. He did not act cold. He did not act eager either. He was polite, calm, and steady in the way he had always been. My mother brought flowers and looked at him with the face of someone realizing she had missed a person, not just information. Caleb shook his hand and said, "I owe you an apology too, even if we just met." Ethan nodded and said, "I appreciate that." My father was the last to speak. For most of dinner, he was quieter than I had ever seen him. He asked Ethan about his housing projects, and I could tell from the careful way he phrased the question that he had researched him. Years ago, that might have made me emotional. That night, I let it be only a beginning. After dessert, my father stood at the end of our dining table. His hands were folded in front of him, and for once, he looked less like a judge and more like an old man who had finally found the cost of his certainty. He said, "Juliet, I was wrong." No one interrupted him. "I measured your life by what made sense to me. I confused control with concern. I embarrassed you because I thought I had the right to define whether you were happy. I did not. And Ethan, I am sorry that my behavior made this family a place my daughter felt she had to protect you from." The room was completely still. That apology did not erase 8 years. It did not hand him instant access to every part of my life, but it did something important. It put the truth where it belonged, not on me, on him. Later that night, after everyone left, Ethan and I stood in the kitchen loading plates into the dishwasher. I felt lighter, but not because everything was fixed. Everything was not fixed. My father would have to earn trust slowly. My mother would have to learn how to listen without smoothing over the hard parts. Caleb would have to notice when silence made him comfortable at someone else's expense. But for the first time, I was no longer carrying the family lie alone. The lesson I learned is one I wish I had learned earlier. Love without respect can become control. Family without listening can become a place where people hide the best parts of themselves. And no one should have to shrink their happiness just because someone else only understands one version of a successful life. Education is not only what we learn from books or careers. Sometimes the most valuable knowledge comes from finally understanding our own worth, setting healthy boundaries, and refusing to let shame speak louder than truth. I still believe families can change, but only when honesty is stronger than pride. And if you have ever hidden a part of your life because the people closest to you made you feel judged instead of loved, I hope you remember this. Your peace is not disrespect. Your boundaries are not cruelty. And your happiness does not need permission from anyone who refused to see your value when it was standing right in front of them. The team behind Revenge Broken Trust is working hard to create meaningful, emotional, and well-crafted stories that leave viewers with something valuable to think about. This is a fictional story created for educational purposes, meant to share useful lessons and positive messages with our audience. The father in this story is a painful example of how pride and judgment can damage a family more than he realizes. He believed he had the right to define his daughter's happiness, but in the end, he had to face the consequences of his own arrogance. If you were in Juliet's place, how would you handle a father like him? Forgive him after a sincere apology, or keep your distance until he truly changed?